All right, let's talk about something called system hardening. Now, I know, it sounds super technical, but the idea behind it is actually pretty simple. I want you to think of your entire digital life, your computer, your network, all your accounts, as your house. Today, we're going to learn how to properly lock the doors, secure all the windows, and most importantly, protect what's inside.
So let's just be real for a second. When you get a new device or set up a new system, those default settings, they're basically throwing an open house party for hackers. The front door is unlocked, the windows are wide open, everyone's invited. And that's because the core problem is this: a default system is almost always a vulnerable system.
So what do we do about it? Well, we harden it. Hardening is just the official term for the process of methodically locking all those digital doors and windows. But here's the thing you have to remember. This isn't a one-and-done task. It's a continuous process, kind of like a homeowner who's always checking the locks and making sure their property is safe and sound.
Every secure house starts with a really good plan. I mean, you wouldn't just start nailing boards together without a blueprint, would you? Of course not. The exact same thing goes for cybersecurity. Before we do anything else, we have to build our security on a solid, well-thought-out foundation.
In the security world, that blueprint is called a secure baseline. You can think of it as the builder's master plan for the house. It's a standard, pre-configured setup that you know is secure from the get-go. That way, every new computer or server you add to your network starts from a position of strength, hitting a minimum security level right out of the box.
Now, creating this blueprint is a pretty methodical process. First, you figure out what the system actually needs to do. Then, you lean on proven industry standards, from organizations like NIST or ISO, to create what's called a known good configuration. And the last step is absolutely crucial. You use automated tools to push this baseline out to all your systems, and then you constantly monitor them to make sure they don't stray from that secure state.
This brings up a really interesting question. Who actually gets to set the security rules? In most systems we use every day, it's like a house, where the resident, that's you, decides who gets a key. That's called discretionary access control. But in super high security environments, it's totally different. Imagine the architect who built the house sets all the rules, and not even the person living there can change them. That's mandatory access control. And as you can guess, it's a much tougher nut for an attacker to crack.
Okay, so we've got our blueprint. Now it's time for some immediate action. Let's get to the practical stuff, locking the doors and windows. This is all about reducing what we call the attack surface, which is just a fancy way of saying we're shrinking the number of potential entry points for an intruder.
Think of this as your day one must-do security checklist. First up, change every single default password. Don't just change it, make it strong, and get in the habit of rotating it. Next, think of open network ports like unlocked windows. Find the ones you don't need and slam them shut. Always use secure protocols like HTTPS. And finally, this one's huge. Turn off any services or programs you simply aren't using.
And that last point leads us to a core security idea: the principle of least functionality. It's so simple, but it's incredibly powerful. It just means a system should only have the apps and services it absolutely needs to do its job, and nothing more. Why is that so important? Well, because every extra piece of software, every extra service, is another potential vulnerability. It's another unlocked window you might completely forget about. And this right here is a perfect example of how we control what software can even run. On one hand, you have block listing. That's like having a banned list at a club. It tries to block the known troublemakers, but new ones can still sneak in. On the other hand, you have allow listing, which is way more secure. That's like having a strict VIP list at the door. If your name's not on the list, you are not getting in, period. Everything is denied by default.
So, we've got our blueprint, we've locked the doors and windows, we're done, right? Ha, not even close. Security isn't a one-time project you can just check off a list. It's like home maintenance. It requires constant, ongoing vigilance to keep things secure over the long haul.
Let's talk about software updates, or patches. Why is it so crazy urgent to install them? Because the second a company releases a patch to fix a security hole, hackers get to work. They literally take the patch, reverse engineer it to figure out exactly what the vulnerability was, and that gives them a perfect roadmap to attack any system that hasn't been updated yet. It's a race against time.
And because that risk is so high, professionals don't just click update and hope for the best. They follow a careful 4-step process. First, they plan it all out. Then, they test the patch in a safe environment to make sure it doesn't break anything critical. Then they carefully implement it, often in waves. And finally, they audit everything to verify that the patch was installed correctly everywhere. It's a systematic defense.
All right, let's imagine the worst has happened. An intruder somehow got past our locks, they bypassed our alarms. What happens then? Well, we need one last line of defense to protect our most valuable assets, the data itself. This is all about protecting the valuables inside the house.
And that last line of defense is encryption. It's simply the process of scrambling your data into a secret code that nobody can read without the key. So even if a thief breaks into your house and steals your files, all they've got is a bunch of unreadable gibberish. It is the digital version of locking your most precious items inside a high-tech safe.
And we can apply this protection at all different levels. Full disk encryption is the biggest. That's like putting your entire house inside a bank vault. You can also get more specific, like with partition encryption, which is like having a safe in just one room. You can go even smaller, down to a single file, like keeping it in a locked document box. And you can get as granular as encrypting a single entry in a database. That's like a secret line written in a coded diary.
So, after all this, what's the single most important thing to remember? It's captured perfectly in this quote. Security isn't a product, it's a process. You just can't buy a tool, set it up, and forget about it. That's not how it works. Real, effective security is a continuous, active process.
And that really is what system hardening is all about. It's not about being paranoid. It's about being a smart, vigilant homeowner for your digital life. It's the ongoing practice of checking the locks, patching the roof, and making absolutely sure that your most valuable possessions are secure.
Which brings us to our final question, and it's one I really want you to think about. After everything we've talked about today, take a good hard look at your own digital house. How many unlocked doors do you have right now?